Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review episode 6 of Day of the Dead. So, are we getting this correct now? That there has been a whole 2 episodes that actually seem like you can watch them and you're like, whoa! Like, episode 6 was just like, wow, like like, you could almost say that this episode is pretty dang close to almost like the best episode that I've seen. And there's some kind of tough competition because that pilot episode was really good. But it seems like there's maybe even something better about this episode. I'm kind of torn about it. I'm back and forthing about it. The 6th episode, there's something about it. It's magically delicious. I'm so confused why we haven't been getting this for so many other things. Like we've had so many goofy episodes, but it seems like now they must be figuring something out or just really wanting to actually put some effort into this show and give us something that we're like, I can actually watch this now. It's actually worth watching. I just have to dance through all the garbage that is to have been presented in prior episodes to get back to something that seems to resemble a zombie show that I can actually watch. It's amazing, isn't it? Finally, frickin' we're here now at a good quality episode. Most of it, of course, being taken place within that store that they were to have gone into the last episode. And I'm like, you know what? Like, if they stay in this kind of department store, this kind of Paymart thing, I would be completely fine with that. Like, it may feel cheap to some people, but really, when coming down to it, if it keeps presenting us with good story, I don't care where they're at. Like, I don't even care if we don't really get much of zombies, which really all we get is just some sweet cheeks in this episode, right? Some big, fat, luscious cheeks coming from a zombie. And I'm just like, you know what? like I just thought that was goofy. I just thought that was hilarious. I think that was some kind of fun that we really did need here, and like I think that was a fun thing that they did. I enjoyed that. I don't care if it was really just them just going and like, hey, you can just go and kiss my rump, metaphorically. I don't know, like, hey, we're just gonna put together this show and it doesn't matter what people are to say about it. I don't know. Like maybe there was some metaphorical thing about it, or maybe that was just people on the show finally like actually having fun and not trying to be some kind of woke like garbage or something somewhere in the show, and just putting together something actually decent and actually giving us some characters who had possibly been like weaker like characters seemingly better stronger roles here in this episode. The only 2 problems that I possibly have in this show is anything going on with the whole Logan and McDermott thing. I was like, and plus I was also like, where is Blackwood? Because it seems like it's weird to have not have seen her like with McDermott being a part of this like show. Like I was expecting Blackwood to just be somewhere nearby. Uh, but it's okay that they finally didn't actually go like or have to forcibly tie her into this episode, which I was perfectly fine with. So, like, episode 6 is actually something like I'm just so amazed. It's actually a watchable episode. We've gone, we've got there. We finally got there. We finally got to a place. And I'm sorry about the weird glare that these glasses are to have, but I'm also to just want to just wear these glasses because most of the time they're just avoiding like certain kind of reflective surfaces or lighting and stuff like that. I get headaches a lot from that kind of stuff. So just wearing these to just kind of protect myself. So going into this episode, teeing it up, where are we to focus here? Well, besides Logan and her cure for death, that is to seemingly not be a goofy thing they're going to go back to. We kind of have Logan actually doing some experimenting with McDermott. And I was like, man, experiments, thumbs up. And also, we get to one thing in my head where I was like, you know what? I want to see like I think in the last episode, I'm like, I want to see like scratching. Like we have biting, but now I want to see some scratching. And it seems like we're gonna get some mixture of things to just kind of see how this story is to play out. But really, overall, we just have a lot of characters giving some actually good line delivery, with the exclusion of kind of Amy in the early part of this show, who is kind of throwing a hissy fit. But other than that, like everything else is like kind of just really just good line delivery from this episode. And I don't really care if it kind of feels like a recycled thing from some kind of other zombie show somewhere, or like just something kind of feels like they had just taken this from any kind of show somewhere and just placing it here. I'm like, no, like this just feels like so like well put together. We weirdly have Pops Parker, who I guess was to be campaigning alongside Paula. And it seems like when we mix these two together in this episode, it seems like they're still weirdly campaigning for people, as if there isn't a zombie apocalypse going on. Do these people like realize that the world has gone to and the world is basically ending? Like, I don't know, like some people's headspaces, they're just kind of still thinking that the world is still going on as usual, and like that doesn't quite connect with me. Like we rarely have Herb, who's to just be afraid that he's going to lose his doctor license at some point in time in this episode. I'm like, huh? I'm like, dude, the world's going to crap. I don't think you need to worry about losing your doctoring license or whatever. Um, but we also have like these two characters that are still trying to campaign to win people over, and I'm like, the world's ending. Why are you just campaigning to still be mayor? This makes no sense. What are you doing? But here's the second thing that bothered me. So Fisher is to bring in this one uh, fish finder ultrasound thing in this episode, and they don't even use it. They don't even use it. Um, but really, like the whole aftermath of after that situation, you know what? I'm fine with how that all plays out. So, like, really, with a thing that kind of bugged me, the aftermath of it, like, is to just be kind of fine. So, that was probably like three whole things that probably bugged me. But anything else, like, I was just like, you know what? Like, this is just above and beyond what I'm used to seeing. Even the, like, Captain Pike thing with this episode, that I was just kind of like, so the world's going to and Captain Pike is on her phone just calling up anybody to come on down because they're going to be the next contestant. They're going to die soon, because that's pretty obvious. Because we're still like having, of course, now Paula really just going and kind of divvying out weapons in this episode, and Pops is to just be like, well, hey, since she's doing that, I have to come up with some kind of opposite strategy because I'm campaigning still. And so I'm going to come up, well, with instead of us giving people guns, violently shooting down these zombies, I have to have people remember that these zombies still have hearts. And like that's my kind of paraphrasing, or kind of we're gonna go into a goofy way here with some parts of this episode, but so yeah, so let's go into it. I'm gonna try to recount this episode as best as I can. So man, let's just go into an actually close to or pretty much the best Day of the Dead episode, and we have to go through 5 other episodes to get there. But I'm going to say this, we still have not gotten to a scene that I've said so often has not arrived yet. And so, like, for anybody, I'm assuming what's going to happen. I bet this is what's going to happen. They're going to save the reattachment of Thing probably for the very last episode. How much does everybody want to put on the fact that they're going to save the very last episode of this season to reconnect with opening scene of this season? I am going to bank on it that is what is going to happen now. We have a death in this episode, and now everybody is going to have to figure out, before we get into spoilers, who that is. Let me know in the comments below how you felt about that death. So maybe some people may avoid the comment section if they don't want to get spoiled. Watch this episode and then be like, oh, hey, yeah, oh, because the character who is to possibly Croaked in this episode, like, actually this character is just like, man, this character is really interesting in this one. So, and I try to leave that as vague as possible. So, with that said, let's go into that double 5 time territory. Let's just go into spoiler time. Spoiler time, it's about the time you spoil this episode. So, immediately now that everyone has supposedly seen this episode, checked it out, immediately I'm going to say right off the bat, before we actually get into the episode, Trey. I hated this guy for I don't know how many episodes. Loathed and hated him. Even there was like some kind of little sliver of something where I could see a glimmer of hope in this character via the last episode. But man, in this episode, man, does this character just turn around and just have us just be like, you know what, like, I want to root for this guy, weirdly. Like, I'm just kind of happy that we have this kind of character that has finally found his balls. Thank God. And then we turn around and have him like lose kind of something once he finds his balls, sadly enough. So let's go into the very beginning of this episode. So very beginning in the early stages of this episode, we weirdly have these 2 girls that are going through this forest, and one girl is to weirdly have this branch coming out of her chest. And I'm like, okay, please don't have this whole weird tree girl thing, like, going to just carry this whole show. Like, I was just so concerned that they were having some kind of goofy thing being put into this show. And I'm like, okay, how are we just gonna, like make this, like, a dumb thing? But actually, they turned a lemon-like thing into lemonade here. or they put like a very goofy thing and turned around and made it a lemonade. Uh, so beginning of this episode, we have, of course, uh, let's go and cover, let's go and cover Fisher and Lauren and Herb, and they're all driving up, driving with this hearse, and so these two girls are in the forest, and so these girls pull over to go and help these two girls, and one girl's have a tree in her chest. So basically, even though it's just a branch, still, it sounds funny to say tree in her chest because it also is to sound better than branch in her chest. So they run over to this girl, and so these girls go and take this opportunity to go and steal these people's car and drive off with it. And so now Amy is to go into this hissy fit, which I'm just like, dude, this, like, please don't tell me this is all how we're going to just start this episode. But then Herb is to turn around and is to tell Amy, it's like, you know what, like, buck up. Like, it's kind of like, just shut up, like, freaking, like, stop acting the way you're acting, and, like, let's just get out of here. And so all of a sudden, Herb is kind of doing this whole kind of like rigmarole speech, whatever. And so I'm like, okay, like, this is cool. And then Herb ends up getting this zombie come from behind him, because the girls, before they were to run off with this car, was to mention that this zombie was to be this perv that was, I guess, to have his like his pants down. And I'm like, couldn't they have actually just kind of had some kind of, like, I think what they were, like, maybe what they were thinking was going on wasn't actually what was really going on. Like, I think, like, maybe this guy wasn't just a perp. Maybe he just dropped his pants. Maybe he just, like, maybe his pants just, like, maybe his pants were too big. I don't know. And so maybe they just fell down coincidentally. But these people are just like, oh no, he was a perv. So all of a sudden we end up seeing this zombie with just his cheeks a flapping into the winds of wherever this place is. We see a zombie, and like the girls were mentioning that they were like focusing on his twig and berries just sifting in the wind, but I'm like, but those cheeks though, those cheeks, because that's all they focused on, because you can't show a wing on a TV show. So this zombie is coming in pantsless and coming in hot, and so Herb ends up getting scratched, which I'm like, yes. Tell me how long a person is to not turn into a zombie via a scratch, because we've already seen someone get bitten, so now I want to see if a scratch is to make somebody turn into a zombie a lot quicker. And so Herb is, like, at first we almost completely forget about the scratch, but then Herb has to go and kind of doctorate himself, and it looks like Herb is starting to get sick, and I'm like, wait a minute, so is a scratch going to turn somebody a lot quicker than a bite now? I'm so, like, how is that not slower? How is that not slower? Because it looks like Herb is like, ooh, gee, golly, I don't know, I think I'm going to turn into a zombie. That's what I was thinking was going to happen here, that he was going to quickly turn into a zombie. I'm like, how is it that scratches turn people quicker? Huh? I don't know. We'll have to see in the next episode, next week, we'll have to see if Herb just turns into a zombie. And I'm like, what? Scratches turn people quicker? That's why we haven't had people been scratched on this show. Gotcha. So now these people are like defending off these zombies with like sticks and whatever random things they can find. And so all of a sudden, Bobby, I feel like I want to, like, every time I hear the name Bobby, I always immediately go into like King of the Hill. Or it's like, Bobby? What are you doing, son? Bobby? But yeah, so Bobby is to go on and is to shoot with his double barrel shotgun and take out one of these zombies. And so he's like, hey, you guys need a ride? And so they're like, heck yeah. And so here's also a little interesting thing. So Herb is to really just hate Lauren because he is to mention that he is to possibly be mixed up with Lauren and possibly lose his doctrine, which world is ending, so that's not a problem, but we just have Herb who just doesn't trust Lauren because we find out in this episode that this girl used to be a drug addict and she had magically persuaded Fisher to give her certain prescriptions to get more drugs. And so Lauren was just an addict, but now it seems that she is to be having a little bit of slippery slope going on in this episode where she is 90 days clean and sober, but it seems like she's going to get a little bit of an issue in this episode. But we'll get there. So we got all that kind of out of the way. If there's any little bit of dialogue that I probably got through here, like I think that was all the main ones. So they go with Bobby to go to this Paymart, and so when they make it to this Paymart, we find out that Paula is going and starting to give people ammunition, guns, and whatever. And so Pops is to come into the fray and tell Paula, it's like, why are you giving all these people guns? And Paula is just like, well, like, we need to defend ourselves. Like these people are trying to, like, these zombies are trying to kill us. And so Pops is just like, well, but there are loved ones. Like, they used to be, like, because when Bobby is to kind of go out there guns blazing to just shoot everything that moves, Pop is just like, no, like, wait a minute, your your pop or whatever, your paja or your papa, your whatever he ended up goofily calling his grandpa or something. Pop was to tell Bobby that, like, his relative, like, when you really think about it, like, how could this guy go off and shoot anybody? Because when he is to see anybody, he is to basically see his paja or his papa or his relative. Like, every time you go and you shoot somebody, you might as well be looking into the eyes of a zombie, but like a relative of yours. And so Bobby's like, yeah, like, Pops, you're right. Like, I'm gonna go and, like, get some nets and, like, save these people, because maybe they're gonna come up with a cure. Maybe they're gonna come up with a way of beating this whole thing, which I'm scarcely just like, you know what, I don't want a cure. Like, I want them to just wipe all these zombies out. And I think by the tail end of this episode, it just tells them, like, hey, let's just wipe these zombies out. Because we've tried to be compassionate, but that time is over now. So in this episode, let's go and let's focus on to the Logan thing to just kind of cover that in one fell swoop, so we don't have to like kind of intermittent continue to go back to it. So Logan is experimenting with McDermott, and she is to go and place certain things that McDermott was to have had in his life to make him remember possibly how to use certain things, or to see if he has some kind of memory of his past, or if all of that is gone and he doesn't understand much. Like, basically, we have it here where this is kind of the equivalent of Rise of the Planet of the Apes, where it's like, hey, like, give this monkey a gun and see what it does with it, kind of thing. So McDermott is to go and start touching these random items, and then he has this lighter and he starts to figure out how to relight it. And so he puts this lighter over his hand and he's like, yeah, fire, kind of thing. So Logan is just like, oh, so you do remember something. You do remember stuff. Like, you do remember which thing is actually yours. Like, oh, okay. So, like, this zombie isn't completely just unknowledgeable of whatever. So, Logan tries to grab uh, McDermott's wallet, and so McDermott grabs Logan's hand, and so but McDermott finds a way to kind of get uh, her arm out of this cage. But McDermott is to get his wallet and is to go and take his badge and put his badge onto his chest. So Logan is to go and just be like, okay, so this guy like he can remember things, and so now, Logan is to go on and find McDermott's cell phone and is to try to figure out how to turn this cell phone on. So she finds McDermott's finger and is to press the finger onto the phone. I guess luckily he fingerprinted it. And so now uh, Logan is showing McDermott some video and of something that McDermott had said, like, "Oh yeah, we're not gonna show anybody this." It's like just as a kind of reflective thing, I guess, showing like what McDermott's wife looked like, so we get to see like what McDermott's wife looks like through a video, barely, and so McDermott sees that video and he's like, ah, so. Uh, And so Logan is to realize that, like McDermott, there's something there. There's something in there. So uh, we also have Logan who's going and doing a phone call where she's to mention that she needs more time with whoever she's talking to I guess understand what she is to go on and to try to like figure out how to come up with either some cure or some kind of something. So, which McDermott is going to get cured, right? No, because we've already kind of set that up because McDermott is going to turn into a zombie that is to be going off and killing people, but we'll kind of see how that plays out. So now that that technically is done out of the way, and like I think I covered all of that. So let's go back to the Paymart stuff. So now Amy is to go off and kind of have this margarita like mix, and she ends up seeing Trey, who is to be uh kind of off to the side, kind of in his mood and wanting to go and drink some beer heavily. Because Paula was to go off on Pops and was to mention all the trials and tribulations that she had gone to get to this moment where she had to fight off like a zombie and have Nicole get killed and almost have her son get killed and so on and so forth. And so she really just wants to kill and fight all these zombies because otherwise her family's going to have been killed. And so both Luke and Trey walk off, and Luke is to mention, like, well, man, like, if I were to have actually gotten killed by these zombies, like, what better speech would Paulo would have really had to really campaign here for this moment? And so Trey is like, well, like, hey man, don't think that way. Like, come on, like, yeah, like your mother is just kind of like she's trying to win people over, but so Trey is to go and talk to Amy, and so Amy is to go and tell Trey that she was to go and try out Krav Maga, which is basically some karate. And so she went and she did that, I guess, to get her confidence up. And that Amy is to tell Trey that maybe he's going to need like a thing like Krav Maga, like one real moment to kind of turn his life around. And so maybe he just needs to like find that one moment. And because like Trey is like, well, I think it's a little too late to like try karate right now. And she's like, well, like maybe it's not karate, maybe it's just some moment, or maybe it's just something. And so Trey goes and meets up with his wife, who is now to be like chewing and spitting and tobaccoing. So Trey is to now go and tell his wife, it's like, you know what, I'm not gonna be a guy that's gonna be holding your purse anymore. Like I'm gonna be somebody. and and so Trey is to go on and be this much more confident man, and he ends up lip locking with his wife, and he's like, that tastes like ass. And then he walks off. So Trey is to seemingly find his balls somewhere. And so Trey is to like really present this kind of front of things. So let's get to like Herb, Fisher, and Lauren and everybody else. Because like we had the one moment where Fisher is to realize that Amy is drinking. And so Fisher's like, are you seriously like having a party while I'm saving lives over here? Because Fisher is to take Lauren and sew people up. And like Lauren is just like, man, like I wish that you were a dead person so like I could like not have to worry about like what I'm doing. So this person is looking at her, and Fisher's like God, this girl has like no bedside manner. To where like Fisher's like, nobody's dead here, everyone's fine, like no one's going to die. Like so Lauren walks off because Fisher's to tell her like, hey, how about you just go over there and just look at that patient. So because Fisher is to tell Lauren, it's like, well, hey, if you can kind of suit up or if you can kind of sew up a dead person, you can probably help me do like certain kind of surgeries and whatever. Which I'm like, yes, like immediately, like Lauren. That's why I wanted her to last as long as she could, because I'm thinking like we could actually have this girl be used in some kind of means here. So yeah, so Fisher is talking to Amy, and she's having a party, and Fisher's saving lives. And so now we finally get up that Fisher, like, finally brings up the fact that he was to actually really, like, feel very affected by the fact that uh, that Amy's father, Herb, was to chuck this prenuptial agreement in Fisher's face. And I was like, you know what? Like, technically they have a mayor here. If these two actually wanted to get married, they could do it right here and now. If and wouldn't that be a great episode to maybe be in the next episode, or to possibly be a way to probably end this show, because I feel that's probably where they're heading, is like they have to figure out how to end this show, and why not do it with a wedding? Technically with a zombie apocalypse like wedding, but a wedding nonetheless. So Fisher like goes off and is to meet up with Herb, and so Herb is just kind of mentioned, I think, the real reason why he was to not trust uh, Fisher with his daughter was really just because uh, Herb couldn't trust Fisher with his practice because of that whole situation with Lauren, how she got Fisher to write her certain prescriptions, and she took advantage of it, and so on and so forth. So Fisher is to have that talk out, and so really I think Herb is just trying to hang Fisher on this, and Fisher is to just be like, well, hey, like with Fisher, it's just like, well, like that was in the past, like this is now, this is right here and now, like everybody is just hanging on to like the past still, as if any of this garbage really does matter, and it honestly doesn't, but it creates for interesting story here. But so Herb is going off and is to heal his wound, and is to try to put a towel on his wound, and is starting to look a little pale. So I'm like, okay, is he going to turn soon? Is he going to turn? Because we forget about the scratch, but then he like goes and pulls down a part of his tux to showcase that he is scratched. And I'm like, he did get scratched. Yeah, we'll see how that plays out. So, uh, so Fisher and Lauren are to find the girl with the branch in her chest, and they're like, oh my god, you guys made it here? And they're like, well, yeah, we're sorry, like we just like survival of the fittest, like people are just gonna go and steal and then you're gonna come back and find that they're still alive. And so this girl's reasoning is that her sister really needed help, and so they just decided to just commandeer their vehicle because this girl just really needed help. So Fisher is to go off and find this fish finder thing that might be this ultrasound equivalent, to be able to figure out how deep this branch is in this girl's chest. And so Herb is to mention to Fisher, it's like, well, hey, like, if you pull this thing out, you'll probably kill this woman. So we really have to be very delicate about how we treat this whole thing. Or Herb is just like, well, like, maybe we shouldn't even treat her at all. Like, maybe we should just leave her to die and focus more on saving people who we can actually save, and letting this girl just die, because like we can't save everyone. And so what they decide to do, because weirdly, like this girl with this branch in her chest is to just, I guess, go into some kind of goofy seizure or something. She start to foam at the mouth for some reason. Like maybe there's an infection that's set in. I don't know. But this girl is foaming at the mouth. So Fisher decides to just yank out this thing without this ultrasound or fish finder like thing to just scan this woman's. They just yank this thing out and then hope for the best. And that hoping for the best just leads to this girl is now dead. And so they just put her body into some room, and Lauren is weirdly putting a wet towelette upon a girl's face who is dead. And I'm like, why is she doing this? Is she going to try to preserve the body? What is she doing here? I am so baffled or confused by this scene. But I guess Lauren just needed something to do. But when this girl was getting this tree branch pulled out of her, Herb was to go and tell Lauren to go and find some kind of drugs so that way this girl could get some kind of pain medication to deal with the pain of having this branch thing being pulled out of her. So Lauren ends up going and finding this place that has medication, and it seems like there had been some people that had been taking certain medications. And so Lauren is to find out there's 4 left. And one is to fall into the ground, and Lauren's like, 90 days, So I'm kind of curious now that Lauren is to have these pills in hand. Is she gonna turn into like Gregory House from the House show, or all of a sudden she's gonna start popping these things and just start falling off the wagon again? And then maybe she's gonna die after that because she's gonna be desperately clinging on to all these kinds of medications. I'd like to hope that she doesn't go into that route, because I'd like to keep this person on the show for as long as possible, but we'll see how this character plays out. So, when Lauren is to come back with this medication, Herb is to ask Lauren, it's like, well, hey, did you take any? And Lauren's like, no. So, but that all just becomes all for naught anyways, because he ripped this thing out of this girl, she dies, and then Lauren is to pat her with this towelette. It's just like, man, like, this sucks how this all just broke down. So we have, of course, Paula, who is wanting to try and figure out how she can force Pops to not have people do all these netting like things, because everybody's going off and trying to catch all these zombies and not shoot them now. And so Paul is just like, God, you guys are risking your lives to protect zombies. This does not make any sense. So Paul is trying to figure out like a way to make all these zombies, or all these people, be afraid of these zombies again, instead of being compassionate to them and remembering that all these zombies were to be their friends, family, and whatever at some point in time. So Paula is trying to figure that out. So while that's going on, we have of course, Tree Branch Girl Zombie making her way back to being undead and coming after people in this store. And so I think the girl named Cindy is to go on and is to like mention about her sister and so on and so forth, and that her sister is probably going to become a zombie. And so like Pops is just like, well, don't think of that as that, like, still remember that she's your sister, and like, and we're also your family, and because we're all in this together, and Pops is still freaking campaigning like a mother. So this zombie is coming in and is going to kill all kinds of people, and so the one person she ends up going after is Pops. And so this girl just falls on top of Pops. And so he at first is trying to be all this compassionate and whatever, but then Pops is just like, oh no, F this. Like, just somebody kill this woman. Somebody shoot this woman. Like, come on. Like, freaking, I'm gonna die here. And so what ends up happening is, like, I think Bobby ends up tossing this net over this girl, and like that's not doing it. So we have it where Trey comes in and is to have this shovel, and he's like, I'm gonna be the one to save the day. And so Trey comes in and has this shovel and is to smack up this zombie. And we're thinking like, oh, okay, here's where Trey's gonna find and really cement that he has a pair. And so all of a sudden, Trey is to get overtaken by this zombie, and this zombie is to be on top of Trey. And then this zombie ends up going and ripping out Trey's throat, and we're like, oh my god, Trey's going to die here. Like, of course. Like, it's Sean all over again. When anybody is to have this kind of upswing of their character, that's when they're going to die. And so basically we can now figure that out now, that like this show, I guess, is not going to be that like that unobvious, that like if someone is to have a good part of their character, that means they're going to die shortly thereafter. And so you can just plan for when anybody is going to have a really good episode. That means they're going to die 5 minutes or 10 minutes later. So Trey is to have saved people, but he dies in the process, and so he's bleeding out. And Paula is like, oh no, Trey, you're bleeding out. And so Paula is crying because we find out that Paula had brought this zombie into the fold to have her get people being attacked by this zombie, so they would just toss out that whole net idea and go back to shooting all these zombies and killing all of them. So Paula had planned this whole thing, but she's so much in guilt for what she had done, because the end result is her husband was to die. And so I'm like, oh my god, this is so brilliant. This is such like poetic like things going on here, where Paula was to try to like think she was to do the right move by suckering in this zombie, to just have it be that this zombie's just gone on to killing the wrong person, technically. So that's just how this episode is to fizzle off. In my mind, there might have been a spot here or there that I probably didn't talk about in this episode, but I also want to get out of here because I realize how long this episode was and how long I've been talking. So that said, I hope that I've covered everything, but I'm sure like we're also to have a number of things. Like I didn't cover much of the Cam stuff and Luke, where they're going off and smacking the baseball like dummy kind of thing, where I'm like, man, like, okay, like we have some like possible baseball bat things used in the future. That might be something interesting, to see a zombie getting hit by baseball bats and see them kind of like cloaca or whatever freaking fall over. But like I guess we're just really just having two youths kind of working their problems out with either their family or whoever. And so it's kind of interesting kind of seeing Cam kind of interact with Lauren and kind of mentioning like, well, hey, yeah, it's like it's great that like we could reconnect with one another. 'Cause it seems that maybe Lauren and Cam may be like going into like some relationship seemingly in the future with one another, and because it kind of presents that that might be a possibility that they're both kind of happy that they get to see one another again, and that neither one of them had died. And so Luke and Cam are kind of going and hitting this baseball uh, thing, and I was like, you know what, like. I guess these two people are just kind of like working out like their aggressions, and like they're gonna just be better characters for it, I guess. So yeah, so I think I've covered most of I think I've covered, yeah, like if anything, if there's something that I missed, there's probably gonna be rebuttal in next week's episode. But probably by then there's gonna be so much things rattling around in this brain. Uh, Also, probably I haven't gotten into comments very much lately, just because I've been so consumed. There's a lot of content that I've gone and done that people probably aren't even aware that I have done already. Uh, like Ghostbusters Afterlife is going to get out soon. I just have a ton of content that I'm going and doing also. Uh, there is just a lot of videos that I have like on the back burner that I've kind of doubled up on because there's some good content out there now. There's actually some good shows out there. There's some good movies. So hopefully I'll get to all that. Um, but yeah, but I'm also going to get out of here. Bye, buddy. Bye, buddy.